and I hope you all will have a wonderful time tonight. My name is George Lee. I'm the National President of Gatekeepers Singapore. I will now just kick off this whole session to just explain a little bit what is this whole talk and discussion tonight about. We talk about the redemptive enterprise. This is part of our series of engagement called the R.ally. R in many ways means many words: redemptive, reset, reflect, renew, revive, Ruach, which is Holy Spirit, Re-calibrate, and restore. And so we believe that this whole calling of God into the area of business is part of that whole redemptive purpose of God. And so we would want to encourage you to just listen through this whole session. And this our lab, and why lab? Because we believe that God is giving us the creativity to be co-creators with Him, to begin to come through with ideation and to come through with creative enterprises that we can bring to test in the laboratory and to see the promises of God being fulfilled as we put it to test some of the hypotheses, some of the ideas that we come across and what God's promises are, and we can just see through this whole exercise how God is fulfilling His purpose in the area of business. So I will just share a little bit on why redemptive enterprise and this whole understanding of what is a redemptive enterprise. So as you see, there are three broad categories that we can look at business in general. The most common is what we call the utilitarian model. You ask anyone, whether Christian or not Christian, why are you in business? What's the purpose of your work? Earn a living, make money, and so forth. And in a broad sense, this is called the utilitarian model. And we are very driven by our own self-interest to maximize profit. And in a way, it's exploitative because we are making use of people and resources for our own benefit. And so the whole utilitarian model is essentially the most common model that is in the world. Then we have the ethical model, which is a much better position from the point of a believer because you want to be ethical. You want to do what is right and ethical. It's a moralistic model. And this can be whether you're a believer or not a believer. It can also span between self-interest to interests of others as well. And so sometimes we use this whole term called enlightened self-interest because it's for your own self-benefit, but you still think of doing things that are morally right. But tonight we want to share with you something that is more than an ethical model, that so that as a disciple of Jesus Christ, you begin to see a greater purpose for the business that God has called you to. And that is the redemptive model. And in that redemptive model, what do? We basically advancing God's kingdom. The Lord's Prayer reminded us, Jesus taught us this prayer: Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so through the redemptive model, we bring and live out the kingdom of God here and now in this earth through stewarding what is put in our hands, the earth, through the business that we conduct. So let's go first to understanding the worldview of what's happening in the world. The secular worldview is where most of the time how business works. And what is this secular worldview? The best understanding comes from this whole statement made by Milton Friedman, a well-known economist, who in the New York Times back in 1970 wrote a whole paper, and that whole paper became a foundational teaching in legal and financial circles of capturing what is the purpose of business. So this paper he wrote is entitled "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase its Profit." And what do you mean by that? There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profit, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. And so this is what is the worldview of the world, and how do we uh, engage the world. The, the worldview of the world is very much surrounding the whole area of profit. So what are the key features? The main purpose of business is to make profit. Shareholders are owners of company. The business organization must really serve the shareholders. Shareholders provide the organization with risk capital, and in exchange expect management to try to maximize return. And so the culture of such a business organization becomes exploitative, using people and resources to benefit oneself. The focus is on self-interest. So let's go to the biblical worldview, and this is where we are as believers to understand what would be the biblical worldview. And I think one of the biggest problems that we all face, among believers especially, is to have this dualistic spirituality or dualism. Secular, sacred divide. Business is secular, nothing to do with our faith. So we keep the two separate. And so this is a big fallacy, because this is how we learn, because our education system was from the Greek origin, and we are taught to look at the world in this dichotomous fashion. But the Hebrew world shows us God talks of a holistic view that everything is about our in goes in relation to God and our relationship with God. And so there is no secular or sacred. Rabbi Zacharias once said that the opposite of sacred is not secular. The secular term is a convenient terminology by humanistic thinkers, because the opposite of sacred is profane. And therefore, if what you do is not sacred, it is profane. It is profanity. And so this is where we are. And so therefore, what does the scripture say about this understanding? And if you begin to understand, either Christ is Lord of all, or he's not Lord at all. If he's only Lord on Sunday in church and not Lord on Monday in your office, he's not Lord at all. And so this is an important understanding that we have. And in Colossians, what does it say? Right? That's a and this and the Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, 24 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not as for human masters, since you know that you receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. And so when we read in the Bible, the Hebrew root word for work is the same word as worship. So it's avoda, which both in all sense means work, worship, and service. So we got to understand, therefore, to sum up, what is a biblical worldview of work and business and so forth. Our work is our worship. Our career is our calling. Our posting is our parish. Our position is our pulpit. And so this is our understanding, and that is the basis of how do we look at work and business from a biblical worldview. And so when we come, so we are now trying to understand God's purpose for business. But a starting point is to understand earlier the secular worldview puts shareholders as the most important because they own the company. They are the providers of capital. But from a biblical worldview, we own nothing, right? Psalm 24, verse 1 says, "The earth is the Lord, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein." And so everything belongs to God. And, and so what is our role then? God is the owner, and we are his steward. And so all spheres of life, all areas of life, whether it's education, arts and media, government, are all to serve the redemptive purpose of God. And so the objective of a business is to serve the redemptive purpose of God through faithful stewardship of the earth. And so this is the crux of understanding the purpose of business from a biblical perspective. And so therefore we have to come, and so what is this redemptive purpose that we are talking about? We need to understand God's plan for the whole world. What is his big idea, right? First, there is a creation. Then there's a fall. Then he provided redemption. And we look forward to eventual full restoration. So the creation story tells us what and how life ought to be. God created man in his own image to have fellowship and communion with him. He gave us dominion over everything. We are created to image God in the world and to steward the earth. And so the whole creation mandate gives us to tells us be fruitful and multiply, to grow, to expand, to innovate, to create. We are his co-creators. And to take dominion, to establish the reign of God. So in the area of business, is Jesus reigning where you are? So we need to understand God has given us the authority, and we are to exercise that authority and to steward the resources that he has given us through the business platform that he has called us. And so through this whole creation story, he has empowered us and to bring his governance and the culture of his kingdom over everything. However, we were snared by the devil. Satan was jealous of God and created his own culture according to his own design and purpose. And Adam and Eve fell, and that brought us to disrupt our whole relationship with God. So the whole story tells us what and how life now actually is. We all are living as fallen people because of what happened from the time of Adam and Eve. And we live in a fallen world. But God has never lost his control in the fall. And so what happened? He already had his redemption plan from beginning. The redemption story tells us what and how life can be glorious again. And so what is that redemption that is? The cross is the fulfillment of God's redemptive plan for restoring our relationship with him. Jesus came to give back our authority to re-image God back in the world through redemption. And so we are to drive out the works of the devil and to establish the lordship of Jesus Christ in all of life. Our call is to advance his kingdom, create culture so that God is glorified and people are redeemed and restored. And so the final restoration story tells us what and how life will be one day. The final restoration will occur when Jesus returns again the second time. And while we await the final restoration, he has declared the kingdom of God is already within us. And we have earlier shared that he taught us, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so, how do we live out his kingdom today in this world? So, this leads us to the redemptive enterprise. God has gifted many of us in the area of business so that this redemptive enterprise becomes a platform to serve his purpose, to bring redemption, to bring restoration, wellness, and human flourishing to all of mankind through faithful stewardship of the earth. And so this is where we are sharing tonight of why do we do business? As a believer, we are to come into that whole understanding to do business as redemptive enterprise. And so the Jeremiah reminds us, seek the welfare of the city where I've sent you into exile and pray to the Lord on his behalf, for in his welfare you will have welfare. So a redemptive enterprise is undergirded by Jesus' command to love your neighbor as yourself. So what does that mean? How does your business bring wholeness and wellness to your fellow countrymen? So are you focused on just shareholders' value or stakeholders' value? If you love your neighbor, how do you relate to other stakeholders besides your shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, government, and the environment? Do your product, services, brand, vision, and mission enhance the lives of people and glorify God? Do you embrace the biblical virtues of grace, forgiveness, generosity, justice, honor, and patience in the culture of your business operation? So tonight, we have two of our wonderful young entrepreneurs who will share their story of in their journey of a redemptive enterprise. Beyond just thinking of making money for ourselves, and not just being ethical in what they do, but to really bring that redemptive impact into the lives of people whom they serve and whom they employ and whom they provide for. A redemptive enterprise has to make profit to be sustainable. So profit is not a dirty word. And therefore, we need to build profitability into a redemptive enterprise. And so, but it is not the only KPI. The KPI includes many other factors that we spoke about tonight. So without much ado, I will now call on Nicholas Khoo, our moderator tonight. Nicholas Khoo is one of our leaders in Gatekeepers who will moderate tonight's session, and you are welcome to submit your Q&A and so forth for as our speakers chair. So over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Georgie, who's the president of Gatekeepers Singapore, for that very insightful sharing on the redemptive enterprise, which is the topic for tonight. Good evening, everyone. Before I introduce our speakers for tonight, if I can just list out some guidelines for a more fruitful discussion. First of all, for questions, please do not raise your hands or virtually or physically. You can post questions in the Q&A tab below. Before you post the questions, may I suggest that you take a look at the questions that have already been asked, and that if the question is similar, to upvote on those questions instead of repeating the questions. And lastly, but not the least, the chat group is open for interaction. So we encourage everyone to use the chat group to interact. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for tonight. His name is David Pong. David is a social entrepreneur who believes in harnessing the power of business to drive social change and solve the world's toughest problems. Having witnessed rural villages across Asia who remain burdened by waterborne diseases, even in the 21st century, David co-founded WaterRoam in 2014 to design and build innovative water filters that can provide safe drinking water in the hardest to reach places on Earth. Today, WaterRoam's filters have been deployed through its partners to 38 countries globally and have provided clean water access to more than 100,000 people in rural and disaster hit communities. So let me hand the time over to David. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. And thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you for the invitation as well. It's a privilege to be able to share about this journey that I've been on over the past 6 to 7 years. Yeah, so I think what I'll do today is I will first introduce what we do at Water Room, a little bit about myself, and also why I started Water Room, and subsequently also to add on 5 lessons on what I've learned. And of course, I'll love to leave the rest of the time for Reuben to share and also to take questions, right? Right, so this journey of Water Room started in 2014, and that was a time where I was just about to graduate from the business school at NUS. Interestingly, I found out that Reuben, the other speaker, is also from NUS Business School, although he graduated earlier than me. But yeah, so I was conflicted because there were 2 sides of the road that I could take. I was seeing that my friends had already been securing jobs in consulting, in banking, in finance, and I had a specialization in finance as well. So that really got me thinking about what do I really want to do in the future. And I was conflicted because at the same time, God was doing a deep work in me to nudge me towards surrendering what I would like to do in terms of my ambition and my future. And I had an interview with CNBC a few years back, and I did share with them that I actually had a burnout situation during one of the final years of university. And it was in those moments that God was really nudging me towards surrender. And it's not just partial surrender, but really like a full surrender of my future, my ambitions, and to just crush all these various ambitions that I had and say that I have a better plan for you. So that was 6 years ago. I had no idea what I was going to do after graduation. But slowly, God was opening up doors. And one of the areas that he was leading me towards was to explore the idea of water and the idea of combining entrepreneurship together with a social mission, right? So when it comes to water, this is what we think of, right? Like we see beautiful skylines here in Singapore. We have reservoirs. The government pretty much takes care of many of the concerns of water. The main thing we see is probably the tap water supply. And we are sometimes we take that for granted, right? Because we don't have to worry so much. You turn it on, and typically you get water that is even drinkable, right? But as I dig a little bit more into this, I realized that statistics show that 2.1 billion people in the world are still facing a massive lack of clean drinking water. And because of this, they suffer from all sorts of consequences, right? So this is just statistics, but I really wanted to find out for myself. So spent time to go down on the ground and together with some of my friends, these are some of the photos that we took. And these are not stock images that are pulled out of the Google or stock photos, but it's photos that I or my friends who were on these trips together, we took this photo. So for example, we went to Cambodia. We see that when you turn on the tap, that's the kind of water, murky water coming up from the pipeline. Went to Malaysia, you see women and children walking hours just to get water, which is from the river and is this kind of color. In Philippines, we saw lines, villagers queuing up for a trickle of water coming down from the cliff. And in Nepal, we see those collecting from spring water. In Bangladesh, potholes. In Cambodia, also wells. A lot of time they are broken down. And then there are places where they use dams as well. And some better places, they use bottled water. They have access to that. But of course, sometimes whether the water is drinkable is questionable. Right. So what really broke my heart was when I realized also that 50% of children under the age of 12, and this statistic came from the Ministry of Cambodia, and I realized that 50% of them face chronic diarrhea, and not just chronic diarrhea, but bloody diarrhea every single day, simply because the lack of water as well as sanitation. And this is something that really broke my heart and caused me to realize that we have been so blessed here in Singapore. We have access, which a lot of times we take for granted, but there are many out there, people who are made in the image of God, who may not be having the same privilege and access to clean water. They are spending time, they're spending loss of productive hours, their education may be affected simply because they can't turn up in school. They're spending time to be sick and not being able to turn up in school. And so that causes a whole string of repercussions, right? So lack of water is not just a problem itself, but it's the being stuck in poverty cycle, because lack of water contributes to that poor health and poor opportunities for education. And subsequently, when they grow up, they're not as strong in terms of the stature, and therefore the work opportunities become limited. And that also leads to a lower livelihood income or remuneration, which leads to inability to afford basic necessity. And then it goes back to the circle of lack of clean water. So you see, that's a very bigger picture repercussion here that was a really big problem. And so as a student, as a business student, right, I had to do some analysis and understand what was out there. Why is it that current solutions are not working out, right? So not to go too deep in the technicals, but these are some of the different kind of solutions that I analyzed out there, I read about, and I saw that there were still challenges when it comes to solving the water crisis in the world. And I tried to analyze also in terms of the pricing, right? We see that in Singapore, MOM writes there that the average household income is about 8,000. And when we are consuming almost 18,000 liters per month, that only cost us 0.4% of our income. So we hardly feel much of this. But if you compare this to a Cambodian household, where the average household income is about $200 US per month, and they're consuming 10 times less, simply because they don't have the luxury to be able to have so much access to tap water. What we see is that they're spending between 1.7 to 36% of their income. And sometimes this water that they're spending on is still questionable in terms of quality. And if you're spending almost 1/3 of your income on just water, that's quite dangerous, and it doesn't leave much room for anything else. And that's the reality here. You see, a lot of villages are spending on priority needs like food, and water becomes something that's not this priority. If you can make do with river water or free sources of murky water, just make do. And sometimes the idea of diarrhea isn't even in their day-to-day understanding that it's a problem. They just feel that diarrhea is a normal thing that everybody experiences. To make matters worse, disasters strike a lot in these areas. In today's time, you can see that floods are happening all over many parts of Asia, India, China, Indonesia as well. So natural disasters constantly strike, and it causes all this infrastructure that's painstakingly built up over the years to be knocked down. You can see that was on the right side is a photo of me in Nepal during the earthquake, and I'm on top of the van. I had the opportunity to be able to do some sharing about water during that time, but I had the ability to see what situation and disaster looked like, and that was also very heartbreaking to see that many are in this situation where it's so difficult to help, and I wanted to do something about it. Right. So together with two other friends, we decided that we needed to tackle this issue, and the two of them are engineers, and thankfully they are very strong in their environmental engineering. So I take care of the other aspects, whereas they come up with the products and the engineering aspects. And we felt really strongly that we, as Singapore, we've been very blessed, and especially being a water hub, water central place where many technologies in Singapore for water technologies exist, and we had to capitalize on that. So the first thing we did was to understand from the ground what is the situation. We partnered with World Vision in Malaysia and did a lot of interviews. We surveyed the locals, we spent time with them, and we realized that a lot of them who really care about this problem are the women, right? Because they are the ones responsible for drawing water, finding sources of water for the family. And so we spent a lot of time talking to them, and thankful for all the partners who helped to link us up. And then we started to roll out product tests in different places, first in Singapore, in the parks, and also in Cambodia. And we had to learn like how to do all this because we weren't very experienced. A lot of us are very young. And so we had to learn by trial and error and just making mistakes. And you can see that there are all sorts of shapes and sizes of filters that we brought down. And a lot of times it didn't work. Something doesn't work well. Or even like one of these systems that you see, the one in Batam, because it was quite heavy. So when we brought it down, one of our team members actually experienced a slip disc and he required an emergency surgery coming back. So it taught us that sometimes we think that portability means that it can at least fit in a suitcase, but actually we realized that it is more than that. You need something which was much more effective if you're trying to reach into a very hard to reach place on Earth. Right, so that eventually led us to our core principles of design, that we realized that we want to build something that is safe for consumption, meets all WHO, World Health Organization and local standards. It must be simple to use so that local laymen can be able to utilize it. You don't need engineer to be there all the time to be able to use it. And also it must be swift so that it can be brought into the hardest to reach places in the world, because we wanted to be able to provide water for even the most rural of communities, right? So we came up with a what looks like a water pump, a bicycle pump, but instead of pumping air, you can pump water through the system, right? So briefly how it works is you find a pothole, you just connect the hose into the system, stand and pump it as per usual. It's a universally understood action, and immediately you get clean drinking water that will come out really fast. So we're quite confident that this is one of the most portable and efficient system that can be able to provide clean water in the hardest to reach places in the world, right? So since then, we've been thankful to be able to partner with corporates in various kind of disaster situations, with Red Cross and with various faith-based organizations as well. We partnered together with the SAF and go into the conflict zones in Marawi that was pretty dangerous. And also in Rohingya refugee camps as well. Also on a long-term rural basis, we are present in orphanages, in schools, in various rural villages to be able to support them when it comes to clean water supply. So to further provide livelihood opportunities and also to help to reduce the price point, because some communities may not be able to afford the system. So what we've done is to partner with foundations in local countries to train up individuals, to empower them to become micro-entrepreneurs. So what they do is to run micro businesses that will then be able to sell water at a very affordable manner, and all affordable means to local communities, and provide them with much higher quality clean drinking water. Right. So we're thankful that today we have been able to reach out to 38 countries and provide more than 100,000 people with access to clean water. But this really is a drop in the ocean, because just now, as I mentioned, 2.1 billion people are still facing this crisis, and there's justice that needs to be done for many of them. Ultimately, beyond the numbers, what we really aim for is to improve their life, living, and livelihood. So life referring to quality of life, by being able to improve their relationships built in the families by reducing the amount of time they are spending to collect water. If women and children are not spending 4 hours a day collecting water, surely they are able to be much more productive in building relationships with each other. Living standards wise, we also want to help them to reduce issues when it comes to sickness, diseases, and it's simply not fair to be able to not live in an environment that's similar to us, free of sickness and diseases. And that's something we aim to be able to provide equal access to. And livelihood opportunities is to restore that job opportunities and income that they can be able to gain when they are much more healthier. And that also leads them to be able to be much more contribution, provide opportunities for them to contribute better to society. And that really is to live up your full potential and calling as people made in the image of God. And that's something that we really aim to do. So I think I just want to change gears a little bit here to pull out and look at Singapore as well, because Singapore, we've always been talked about as the Antioch of Asia. And there has been, how we've been expressing this is very much through missions, financial giving, and setting up of nonprofits and charity. But what I would also like to challenge us to think about is how we can also leverage on technology, startup environment, as well as businesses and healthcare innovations to be able to bring forth God's love and God's justice to the nations. And because these are also vehicles that can be used well, just like what Brother Georgie was sharing earlier, that a redemptive enterprise can be able to provide, be a conduit of God's justice and restore equal access to many of these basic needs and resources that communities may not have. So I just want to share that it's not just a few companies that are doing this, but there are a community out there, and I have friends who have been working on kingdom-related enterprises, like this company called Yona. What they do is they provide autonomous drones going out to Papua New Guinea. They work with Mission Aviation Foundation, and they serve the unserved with vaccine. And that's very critical because right now it's very difficult to reach some of these unreached groups. In the middle is also a fellow gatekeeper, Kevin, who's running Thundercode. And what they do is to provide blockchain-driven, high transparency opportunities for procurement to be done in a very transparent manner. And that's really been revolutionizing how charities and how many nonprofits are also doing this. And you see, you can use redemptive aspect of utilizing blockchain for the benefit of companies and really to uphold righteousness. And another friend is running Lumetics, which does a smart waste bin. They program IoT onto this dustbin so that you are able to control how much food wastage and monitor how much food wastage is happening in organizations. And this really is an expression of stewardship of resources, of environment. So what we see is a community of such enterprises, which I think it would be something that we invite all of you to be part of as well. In terms of the lessons that I learned, I think one of the first things that I learned through this experience is avoid making assumptions on the problem, right? And this is drawn from the Bible, actually, Luke 10, where Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2, and they're called to first declare the shalom peace, and then after that, they're called to fellowship with the local people. So you see, what's important is that when we are doing ministry or when we are trying to create an innovation, you have to understand the local people and understand their needs. Sometimes we make an assumption of their needs. So for example, just now I shared about how we brought out systems and we realized it's too heavy only when one of our team members had a slip disc injury. And that's simply because we assumed how we can solve this problem from our Singaporean standpoint. But really, if you want to be able to serve and create good innovations or ministry, it requires first to fellowship with people, understand where their needs are, listen to them, and then be able to have opportunities to minister and finally declare the kingdom of God. Secondly is to don't just sell a course, but instead sell a great product or service that creates impact and restore justice. So what I mean is, for example, don't go to somebody and say that here's a really nice pencil case, which is sewn by the poor villagers, poor village women of Cambodia, and please support and please buy. But you shouldn't be doing that. But instead, if you're running it as a redemptive enterprise, you're showing people that here's an exquisite pencil case. It's wonderful, it's trendy, and it's part of it's like latest fashion, and you should really contemplate buying this. And people say, wow, this looks really nice. And then you tell further the story that, oh, by the way, it's made by marginalized women, community groups who are rural and are considered poor. And people will find that, oh, wow, by the way, this is a good effort. And I'm not buying it because of the cost, not because it's developed by poor villagers, but I'm buying it because it's a great product. And by the way, it's also impactful because you help to provide livelihoods to to poor villagers out there. Thirdly is to let God be the CEO. So there are a lot of times in running an enterprise like that where we take on the burden, we take on the stresses of the day-to-day running. But really, if God is the Lord of all, then you should let him take care of everything. So sometimes I also fail to remember this when I try to take up all the burden for myself. So for example, even the COVID situation, a lot of businesses start worrying about what should I do, how should I pivot, how should I store up cash flows, but ultimately I realized that you have to just turn back to God and just say that, God, you are actually the CEO, so I will turn to you and submit all these challenges and problems to you, because this is beyond me. And many businesses today are facing all sorts of challenges which are very difficult to find an answer to. And if it's not for God, it's going to be a very tough journey. Fourth is be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove, because when we work in developing countries, what we've experienced is sometimes we do accidentally face gray areas of ethics. Sometimes there was once that I wasn't even aware that there was a local partner that was trying to do a partnership with us, and the structure of the partnership was actually a form of corruption. And I didn't realize that until I came back and shared it with our board of advisors. And thankfully, we have a group of advisors who are able to see through this, and immediately they said that, hey, actually, you've got to be careful. This is actually in the form of corruption. And because young as we are not very sure. And that was a learning point for us. But yeah, even when we're out there as kingdom businesses, we should not be taken advantage of, and we should be clear about who we are partnering, and be wise as serpents, right? And finally, to operate from a position of love. What that means is that sometimes in the heat of the moment, especially when tensions rise, and it's not that when you run a redemptive enterprise or when you run a kingdom business, there's no tensions. There's still going to be conflicts and tensions, simply because that's the only way to grow. That's the way to learn, and situations are sometimes up, sometimes down. But when it's down, you sometimes will have tensions, and the words that we speak, right? Like in James, it says that the tongue is like the rudder of a ship. The ship can be influenced by the wind and the sea and the waves, but the tongue is like a rudder which can direct this entire big ship in the direction it goes. So I think what is important is be careful what we say, because sometimes we can accidentally speak words which are condemning, or words which will cause people to fall out from their calling or their destiny, simply because we put them down. Words have a lot of power, so we must be able to speak life rather than to speak negative words, and also speak from a position of love, because that really helps us to navigate through difficult circumstances and bind the team, especially in this time. What's important is to build culture that is strong, so that we are able to overcome the various challenges of COVID, right? Yep. So finally, I think some of you may be interested to look into how to tackle justice issues through enterprise. So just quickly running through some points. If you have something that's on your heart that you feel that maybe God is leading you towards, first thing is be concerned about the issue. Try to read up more. Try to talk to people. Talk to communities who are affected by these social challenges or social justice issues. And then after that, ideate. Start thinking about what is the potential solution, and keep going back to the community that's facing this challenge, and ask them how does this solution fit, right? In the startup setting, this is called the lean startup model, or the minimum viable product methodology right now. But there is also the kingdom aspect of it, and you can also see it from this angle. Develop a business model that can be able to generate impact while still making a profit. right? So like what Brother Georgie mentioned earlier, that you can be able to make a profit out of this. It's not, that profit is not a dirty word, right? It's a way to be able to remain sustainable in the long run. And also you want to price it because you don't want to undercut the market. If you provide something for free, you can effectively undercut the market, and maybe another community is losing their livelihood simply because you are running it for free, right? And lastly, continuously monitor and identify whether there is really impact that's been made on the ground, right? So these are some of the things that I've learned over the past 6 years. It's still something that we are very much work in progress, and I continue to pray for wisdom every single step of the way, right? In conclusion, I think just a reminder that we in Singapore, if we are to continue to live up to this calling of Antioch of Asia, let us also remember that we can be able to, through our various means and ways, and especially in the business community, leverage on enterprise to be able to be a conduit of God's love and justice to the rest of the world. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother David, for the great sharing, especially the honest sharing on some of the lessons you've learned. Indeed, justice issues can be tackled through a redemptive enterprise like Water Room, and a business that seeks to improve the living and livelihood of your clients and users. We'll come back to you later on the Q&A session. For now, let's kind of just move to our next speaker, Reuben Ang. Reuben graduated from NUS with a bachelor's degree in business administration. After that, he went to work in a Christian ministry for 2 years before joining, let me just make sure I pronounce it correctly, his Hased&Emet, or H&E for short, in 2012, making him the third generation in his family to manage the business. As MD, Reuben led the rebranding efforts of the company's flagship brands, Elsie's Kitchen and Continental Delight Catering Services. 2016, he spearheaded the creation of H&E's social arm, the Hased&Table. By working with partners, he hopes that this initiative will help to reduce food waste at the wholesale level and provide nutritious meals to communities that need it most, such as migrant workers and low-income households. So without further ado, over to you, Reuben.
Thanks, David. Thanks also for, I just found David was also from NUS BBA, so that's a real surprise. I guess we can catch up more about that later. Thanks, Nicholas, also for introducing me. I guess my story is quite different from David's. I'm coming from a family business that has been around for almost 70 years now. But I think the journey has been something that for the last 8 years for myself has really been something that has taught me many lessons. And what I endeavor to share today is really a gathering of stories and taking stock of the last 8 years, what God has done through the business. And really, it's really all God's doing. Every step of the way, we do our part to try to seek God's will. And really, that's looking back, it's really all God's doing and working through our decisions. I think that will help some of us make sense from an SME perspective, really tackling day-to-day issues at H&E. So just go ahead and share a bit more about our story, how we got here, and also my own journey in that discovery along the way of making decisions, making mistakes, and also really, like most SMEs, firefighting every day. Who we are at Hased&Emet is that we call ourselves a food solution company because we really do everything related to food. That's the easiest way for us to share about ourselves, because some of you might know some of our brands, which I'll share a bit more about later, but really our operations cover anything in the foodscape. So if you have any needs in F&B, usually that's where we come in, even in managing third-party kitchens or consultancy, things like that. And our vision really is to enrich people's lives with our passion for food. It might seem very vague, but I think that's where the journey of discovery and interpretation interpretation is for us to really figure out how can we enrich people's lives holistically, and who are these people that we are to enrich. And it's really everybody in our ecosystem, which really guided our interactions and our relationships in the years that have passed. And really, we want to create that sustainable change through what we do best, which is our passion for food. I think when we embark on this journey, it's going to be a long and challenging one. So we have to do this sustainable change through what we do best and what we are passionate for. And here at H&E, it definitely is about food. So what is Hased&Emet? Two Hebrew words that some of you might know. Hased is that steadfast love, that loving kindness that pursues God's people. And Emet is God's truthfulness of character, his integrity. And really for us, it's about holding that two things in tension in every decision that we do, both in showing that love and also doing it in truthfulness and with integrity. We can't, for example, go to either extreme. You can't make decisions that are purely heart. Everything is sentimental and subjective. And so neither can we also make every decision based on a hard facts, like Emet. It's all brain and really you make very cold decisions. And so a lot of the decisions that have been expressed in the stories that I'll be sharing, really it's about holding those two in tension, Hased and Emet. Even though we are a small local company, we endeavor that through what we do, our brand idea is that it will be a guiding flame, creating impact from where we are here at Boon Lay, small corner in Singapore in an industrial estate. We hope that our impact will be far-reaching, that it will change the industry, the ecosystems that we interact with, and also all the stakeholders that are part of our operations. And so that is what guides us ahead in what we do. We must have big ideas, even though we are situated in the far corner of Singapore. And as I shared, this is a third generation family business. We started in 1953, I believe. So it's been 67 years now since my grandfather started the business, managing the Royal Air Force canteens when the Royal Air Force was still around, so the British time. Fast forward many years now, 2 generations later, my story really began in 2011 when I graduated. During my time in university, I really had the opportunity to think about the skills that I had acquired, and really it was a conversation of what was I to do with those skills. I knew full well that I would be coming back into the family business, but in my time in the university, especially in the Varsity Christian Fellowship, where I continued to serve as staff 2 years after graduating, was really to journey to understand what does it mean to be a Christian businessman. We learn a lot about what we can do, how we can do it with all the knowledge that NUS Business School, I'm sure, has also furnished David as well. But little is talk about how we should do it and how we should carry it out, especially as a Christian businessman. And through that journey in the Varsity Christian Fellowship and the Fellowship of Evangelical Students, I really had the opportunity to study the Bible and to allow that to shape my worldview, through which I saw the world and interacted with every structure and aspect of the business, from people to suppliers to customers and even to competitors, which I'll share in a little while about the stories and how those turned out. So these are some of the brands that some of you might be familiar with, I hope. Our consumer brands like Elsie's Kitchen, we're doing events and institutional catering. We have food courts under the flavors arm of our company. And also we have also gone into event styling and creative solutions under our AQR brand. And also the Hased&Table, which is something that was started to remind us of our mission and the impact that we hope to create through what we do best, which is food. And so the easiest way I can explain it to people is that it's CSR, but I don't really like that term because I feel that it is not something that is external to our business, but really at the core of what we do. And so sometimes CSR can be foreign and random things like cleaning the beach and things like that. But then those are good things in themselves, but then may not always be sustainable if you don't do it through what we do best. And for us here at H&E, it is food. And that's why we hope that through Hased&Table, we will create positive change, missional impact through food and food projects. So just a bit of an overview of what our core businesses are, so that it provides some context to the operations and the people that we interact with in our business. You'll be familiar with the buffets that we do at events, weddings, things like that. Wedding events at churches, solemnization events, thematic setups for events such as birthdays, thematic D&D events for companies, baby full month, things like that. We do executive dining, banquet solutions, usually on site, where we go to our customer's premise to cook and to serve. One of the things that we've been doing for a long while is bento packing, and this has become one of our strongest suit. We are able to pack about 8,000 portions per hour now. This was back then, but now because of this current situation with the foreign worker dormitories, we have ramped up our production quite a bit. So right now it's about 6,000 to 8,000 packet meals per hour. And really is on contingency supply timeline. So usually in very short notice, where we have to pack many bento meals. So this is some of the capabilities that we have built over the years that allow us to widen our impact within the foodscape as well. Some of the things that we have done is to manage the rehabilitation process of the prisons, where the prisoners will be cooking their own meals for themselves, and we have gone in to manage the kitchen for them for a period of 3 years. And that has been a real journey for me also to learn about people in the system, and also how we can also provide meaningful employment and really the journey is after incarceration and the release, and how we can, as employers and as colleagues, really provide the support in helping them to rehabilitate fully into society. Like I mentioned, we have some food courts as well. One of the ones that is open to the public. Not all of the food courts that we manage are open to the public. Some of them are in private factory premises of our customers. One of the ones that you can visit is at IMH, and I'll share a little bit more about what we do at IMH Food Court under our Flavors brand. So like I mentioned earlier, thematic setups, things that set us apart. And really, I think I want to thank Uncle Georgie for sharing really the premise and the journey that I myself went through in understanding God's mission. And really from there is where we derive our own mission. And as I journeyed through the Bible before joining the family business, the consideration is then how do we, people who are found on this side of the cross, make possible and interpret every dimension of the good news through all we do. How do we speak the good news? How do we be the good news in everything that we do today? Knowing full well that we are looking forward to God's redemption and his restoration in the new creation in the world to come. We then, as his people, as people of God's mission, the church, have a role to play to see that kingdom come and to see what we do every day in our work, whether it's in church or home, how every aspect, every dimension of our lives, every structure of society would look like in that restoration. And really that was my own journey of questioning, of discovering, of even testing hypotheses of what really can be applied in a real world SME situation. So really the question is, like Uncle Georgie mentioned, how can we see that kingdom come in our business? I hope that some of you listening here are business owners, and I think you would appreciate how challenging this would be as an SME in Singapore, especially now in the food service sector in this COVID situation. How can we really participate in God's mission of ushering in his kingdom in everything that we do in our businesses today? And I think that would be easiest for me to share of my journey in the last 8 years through looking at different stakeholders within my organization. So one of the biggest group of people that we serve are actually our employees. So I've heard this once. Somebody told me that regardless of whatever business that we do, whether it's undertakers or teachers, or whether it is carpentry work, regardless of the industry that you're involved in, primarily as management, we are in the business of people. And this is the family that I had pictures taken last year, I believe, at a D&D, that I journeyed with in the past 8 years in the business. And I really didn't plan this, but didn't plan this together with Uncle Georgie, but really the passage that he chose about seeking the welfare. The word welfare here is shalom. And shalom really is about so much more than peace. It's really about seeking the holistic well-being, the welfare of the city. And of course, in this company, it is about seeking the welfare, the holistic well-being of the people I interact with. So the journey was, how do I seek the holistic well-being of my colleagues, my employees in the company? And really, this is how we take reference for this, is really looking at what Jesus himself did in restoring, in his ministry, to restore the physical well-being of his followers, of restoring the spiritual well-being of his followers, of teaching them, of feeding them, of also loving them. And really, when we love people, we are loving the image of God. And I think that's fundamental in what we do as employers, as colleagues, as managers, and as supervisors. So I apologize firstly for all the pictures that are here. They're really just helping me to just keep track of the stories that God has impressed upon my heart in the past 8 years as I reflect upon what has happened. One of the first things that I always tell every new hire that I meet in my company is that we are a family business. But to redefine what that means is that we are a business that comprises people who are family. And really everybody that is an organization is family. And what that means is that you have to care for the holistic well-being of all your staff, not just within the confines of work. And I believe, as much as my colleagues are willing to open up about their personal lives, their lives outside of work, it's my responsibility to seek their welfare. And so some of the stories that really are a collection of interactions in the past 8 years, I realize are just facets of that, of what that means. Because I always tell them that we are all family, but you know what does that really mean? I think it only makes sense during crisis or during hard decisions. You see the bottom there. I have interactions with my staff, and you know, as a business owner, the payday is usually on the 7th of the month. I had once on the 10th of the month, just 3 days after taking her pay, one of my employees came to ask for help because she had lost all her funds, all her savings, everything from that month and before at the casino, just within 3 days, which is a big deal for foreign staff. So I have about half of my organization comprises colleagues from other countries, and so for them to spend time at the casino, the integrated resorts, is really quite simple. And really, this is where we have to exercise our care for them on things that really are outside of work, and that includes my HR having to print out self-exclusion forms so that they can submit to the authorities to exclude themselves from the casinos. Sometimes my HR would joke that we are H&E Family Service Center or H&E Social Service Office, and I think that really helps to guide us in our interactions, that really we are seeking the holistic well-being of our colleagues. It includes issues about overseeing or even guiding the morality of our staff, as of those that have continued to build friendships with. Sometimes that allows us to counsel and to remind and to befriend. Colleagues, for example, who are having unfaithful relationships within the office. I think that's quite common. That as you know of these things, how do you seek the well-being and the welfare of the staff who are non-believers, to remind them of their families, even in the area of morality? How do we seek their welfare in that respect? I've had employees who asked help for their bills, and really this comes from our interaction as employers, from very mundane things, discipline, counseling sessions. I realized one of my staff, for example, was coming late for work, and really on further inquiry, I realized that he was having problems at home. And one of the ways these problems manifest in the family are also in the failure to pay bills and things like that, and really causes strain on the family. And so he obviously can't sleep in the bedroom with his wife. And so he ends up sleeping on the sofa. These are very real situations. And so as he shared, I realized that he had problems managing his finances. A lot of times family problems begin with finances as well. And that's one of the reasons why it manifests at work as punctuality issues. And so really it's about whether we want to bother to take care of the holistic well-being of our colleagues. And part of that includes me having to, our HR having to pay his bills before we pay him at the end of the month, helping them to manage their financial well-being, because not everybody we know is financially astute and prudent as well. And so the extent of care and well-being extends to every part of their lives, because I feel that we are called to care for them holistically. Other stories extend to the facilities that we extend to our staff. When building a new building, we put in a gym. We felt that was something that some of them were looking forward to. Massage. We actually have a masseuse on staff. This is always the quirky point I always share in our sharings. All these are just part of what we feel is seeking the holistic and even the physical well-being of our staff, making sure that they're well rested, they're healthy. The picture on the bottom left is about salary benchmarking. We participate in salary benchmarking every year with Enterprise Singapore. We realized that we're paying our staff about 30% more than the market. And really it's about paying not just more, but what is just and fair. So we actually pay one of the examples is that we pay, for example, all our delivery staff the same pay regardless of nationality. Which also means that my Singaporean driver is paid the same amount as my Chinese driver, my Indian driver, my Filipino driver. And that just means that you have to pay everybody a lot more because you're benchmarking against a Singaporean pay. But actually more than that. So we try not to constrain ourselves to what is market best practice, but what is fair. An example with this, just last month, my driver who delivers meals to the dorms, because of the risk that is involved and the hours that are extended, my Chinese driver, mainland Chinese driver, took home $8,000 last month because we structure our driver's incentive and our pay to the size of the order and the number of orders that are sent. So we try to structure our pay in a manner that is just and fair and is sufficient for them, not just to be enough, but to flourish. We even extend loans when we realize that there are situations where there is need. And I think this is something that is very challenging because we need to be very prudent about it. We're not a bank or charity, but we realize that when we want to care for the holistic well-being of our staff, that it extends to financial well-being, and we know how much stress that can cause. Of course, we only extend that to certain situations that are unexpected, situations such as family members back home overseas needing urgent surgery, and of course we require the relevant proof, and usually we make payment directly to the hospitals and things like that. But these are some examples of the extent of care that we hope to extend to our colleagues and employees. I'm about out of time, lots of stories to share. Really, it is about what we do at Hased&Emet is really encapsulated in our name. And so like I said earlier, it's really about holding those two intentions. How do we do things with love, but also in truthfulness? So it really affects the efficiency of HR practices, for example. It's not going to be so clear-cut and scalable. Your policies are not always going to be so black and white. It requires a lot more time, a lot more effort to know each individual personally, know their families, and know their individual situations so that we can seek their holistic and individual well-being in our interactions. This matters a lot to our staff. This is the Harvard Business Review survey that strong ethics and moral standards are important to our staff as well. And this is really how we try to make sense of what we do here to all our stakeholders that may not always understand it from a Christian point of view. We try our best to explain why we do what we do, and we hope that those really open the doors to opportunities that I have had to explain further why it's important for me as a Christian, and also sharing about my faith to them as well. And those are stories that really make sense for them because they experience it themselves. I'm really out of time, but really the relationships that we have within the ecosystem really also share stories about what that redemptive enterprise can look like. My relationship with my competitors really is caught within my role as the EXCO member in the industry and the Association of Catering Professionals, really about convincing, sometimes playing peacemaker to industry players, fellow caterers, not to poach staff, because as one of the leading caterers in Singapore, I made my promise to them that I will not poach their staff or do anything to harm their business. We play fair as competitors, and I think that really sets the tone in the association and in the industry landscape to ensure that there is flourishing and that there is integrity in our dealings. God willing, that will continue to survive. It's not always easy. It's quite tenuous sometimes to manage those relationships, but sometimes we are called to be peacemakers even in the landscape. And that really begins with ourselves, right? How we deal with others really affect the texture of the landscape as well. One last area that I want to share about is really supplies. And really here in Singapore, it's about, I shared some about this before, about sustainable catering. It's really looking at the impact of our supplies as a business. If we believe in a new creation that is good and whole, it really impacts what we do today as a business and the sustainability of our actions. And really for us here at H&A, it also questions our supply chain. And so we ask questions about where our things come from, and we try to educate our customers about them, and so that they understand why things are more expensive when they are sourced ethically from sources that are closer to home in Singapore. Of course, your fish that is grown in Singapore will cost a lot more than something that is mass produced overseas. Something that is brought in from overseas really creates a lot more carbon footprint, and that's why we in our sourcing try to move towards this vision of 30 by 30, which is set about by the government, which is to provide 30% of our own produce in Singapore by 2030. And so we have gone to source our supplies now as much as we can from Singapore, and to share the impact that this creates with our consumers, because they have to come aboard on the journey, because it's going to cost a bit more. And that also means that sometimes you don't always get what you want. For example, there's no beef in Singapore, so we have to manage expectations. We have to communicate value when we are on this journey of endeavoring for more sustainable supply. And some of many of our customers have appreciated that as well. Managing waste, food waste in the process, and also how our customers consume. We try to manage as a business how much they consume. We try to let them know and advise them so that they can make informed decisions, so that they don't end up with a lot of food wastage, which is a big problem in Singapore. Waste on convenience, things like that, disposable waste that create really damage to our environment. And I believe that it's a part of our responsibility as God's stewards of His world to care for His creation as well. And so lastly, I'll share about Hased&Emet, which is our social arm. Really, it's about providing meals. We have done a lot of tie-ups with a lot of VWOs. Now, especially the migrant worker issue has been at the forefront. So people understand the conditions that they live in. This has been a journey that we've taken for the past few years, and we will continue to try our best to work with VWOs that are working directly with communities in need to address in our very small way the food-related issues in providing nutritional needs where there is a deficit. So I'm at the end now. Really, it's about, like Uncle Geordie shared, when we engage God's world, we all have a biblical worldview that is shaped by the Bible. L. Walters here, in his book Creation Regained, really reminds God's people that we all have a worldview, whether you're Christian or not. But hopefully, as Christians, it is something that is shaped by the Bible. And as we interact with different structures in God's creation, we need to be reminded that there's two directions. It's either redemptive or it is fallen. And this really guides me in the different areas of decision making in my work. And I hope that it will continue to be in the direction of flourishing. And I think what helps me is to continue to have that hopeful imagination of what that new creation is going to be like, what relationships are going to be like, what food is going to be like, because we definitely will be feasting in the new creation. There is a feast, right? And so we try to figure out what that looks like and imagine what it looks like as we plan our products. And that's one of the reasons why we try to be more sustainable in our sourcing as well. I don't know what that will mean in a new normal, but it really means about trusting God. I think like David mentioned, really God is our CEO, and really the focus in the next few months will really be about saving jobs. We'll try to continue. We will definitely try to do that and trust God to bring our company forward, because it's really challenging for food service companies in this new normal. One day I hope to be able to host you guys at my facility here in Boon Lay, but I don't think that's possible in the near future. But definitely those who have the opportunity, please do come visit us in Boon Lay. And you can contact me here this address if you have any more questions, or if you just want to talk about business in general. So that's all I have for now, and I will pass the time back to Nicholas. I believe there is some question for the Q&A as well.
Thank you, Reuben, for that very, very insightful sharing. And this is a different perspective that you've offered from a family business, seeking the welfare, not only of the city, but anecdotes of how you look after the holistic well-being of your employees. I think we're going to go into the Q&A section, and just to encourage everyone, type your questions into the Q&A, and we're going to kind of start off the first question, and I think that's directed to David. This is from Jackson, so that he likes the idea of micro entrepreneurship, and whether you have reached out to ethical microfinance companies where they might be reaching out to the same people who needs hygiene and financial inclusion, and where they might offer the economic means to kickstart microloans needed to finance the beginning of such projects at the local village level. David?
Right, thanks Jackson for the question. The micro-entrepreneurship model is something that we are working on quite recently, and it's still something that's still in its infancy. It's not the easiest of models to take off because there's a lot of moving parts. So that's something we are trying to learn. We have gone through many lessons trying to incorporate it in Indonesia, Cambodia, and different places. We experience different challenges, different ups and downs or so. So it's definitely something that we are hoping to expand on. And we have talked to some microfinance companies, but we continue to reach out more. It's something that we are still working on. So if you are able to provide further insights, we'll be definitely keen to explore further. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And I think just staying with you, there's a question from Sister Evelyn, which talks about you actually have an office work culture where you have a policy to encourage forgiveness among the staff. Can you kind of like talk more about it, explain how you do it?
Right, okay. So I think it was a few years ago where it came to a point where there were the various kind of tensions, and I think that's only normal, like what I mentioned just now, that between staff, between departments, there can be unresolved challenges, and sometimes these are unspoken, right? And maybe it's accident. You just feel that why is it not fair that he gets to come in late every day, and I mean that is the smallest of matters. It goes to even larger challenges as well. And I was praying about it, and I felt that, you know, in the Bible it says that you don't let the sun set as you are, and your anger, you don't let the sun set upon your anger. So how do we tackle this? And I felt that it was God just helping me to understand that there is a process of forgiveness can be done, a set of questions that can help in reconciliation. So today we practice this at least once a year, if not once every 6 months. I would facilitate it for the managerial levels. For their department-wise, they are encouraged to do it on a quarterly basis. I can't be there all the time, but I at least do it twice a year. So what happens is first they are to complete this line, and everybody is sitting around a table, and there's one person on the hot seat, and the first thing you say is, "I appreciate you for ... So everyone must start off with a positive aspect of what you appreciate this person for the last 3 months of or the last quarter or the last half a year. And then after that, the second question is, I feel that we can work better together if ... And this is where all the tension and all the challenges and all whatever, you feel that there were some issues that were unresolved. This is where you bring it up, and it helps because a lot of times if you don't have an official setting to say some of these things, it just keeps adding up and become baggage. It becomes very hard for people to work openly. And third question that I will get them to share is, now this person in the hot seat will turn around and share with the rest and say that I'm sorry for ... Right? So they will complete the sentence, and I think you'll be surprised that actually at the start we thought that this was something that is very difficult to do, and those who are new managers, they come on and then they kind of give me the frown and say, how come we do this? It's quite strange. No other company, not many companies do this, and it's usually it sounds very weak, doesn't resonate with like a company that has strong people, you know. But what we realize is that it really helps to remove the tensions, remove the burdens that people face, and I would be thankful, very thankful, that over the years there has been very little or none in terms of gossip, in terms of speaking behind the back. And a lot of this times because people don't dare to say things up front. We always talk about other people's weaknesses. So I believe that office gossip and politics always start because people harp on the weaknesses of others and upplay weaknesses of others rather than upplay the strengths. When it comes to honoring each other, what's important is we honor each other for our strengths. We value them for their strengths and who they are. And there will definitely be weakness. I myself have weakness, but there is a way to complement it with other people's strengths. And that's why we work as a team. So these exercises are carried out in the name of value-based policy that are put in place to encourage team building, to encourage honor in the company, and so that it is acceptable by everyone. Because I have to say that not everybody is a Christian, and not everyone may subscribe to what is in the Bible. But when we see it from a value-based policy, this is something that truly helps. And I've shared this with other companies, other startups, and they have given me quite positive responses on that before. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think the next question is, can direct that to Reuben, but David, you can take a step at it as well. So as a Christian boss, can we fire staff? Have you done it? And what are some of your thoughts on this issue?
Definitely you can fire staff. That's your prerogative. But I think it's also how we do it. I personally, at least in our company, we really very, very seldom we will fire staff. I think we really need to know what is the reason that we are firing the staff. Personally, I think in the past it's very clear cut for me. I've fired staff only on a few occasions, but usually it's because of criminal matters. So usually if there's mishandling of money, there's theft, there's integrity issues, breaking of laws, sexual harassment, things like that. Definitely I will fire the staff. But not for performance issue. I've never fired staff for performance issues. I believe that if there are performance issues, that's usually because of a personal problem or if there's a fit with the environment. And we try our best to restructure the job scope. We try to shift the person around. And this has definitely been a point of tension for me in the company because I need to manage the expectations of colleagues. If they see, how come this person is still around? We know that obviously he's not doing well, he's not performing well, or even from my board, I have to manage the expectations there as well. Why we still keep underperforming staff But I believe that's the responsibility of management and as an employer to develop the staff, help them to find a fit so that they can flourish. So I haven't fired staff for performance issues, but definitely for criminal cases, things like that. Yeah.
David, you have anything to add?
I actually don't have as much experience in firing staff in terms of the number of people that we hire as well. Compared to Reuben, I think not as much. But I think just want to affirm also and re-highlight the point of like exercising grace. There are times also where there are team members who may not be performing up to a certain standard, and there may be a pressure by fellow team members and asking like, is it worth keeping somebody who's like that? But I think what we have always done is to first emphasize, have we exercised grace? Do we understand? Have we talked to the person? Have we understood what's happening? Is it something in the family, in the home situation? I think don't make it don't let it be an immediate decision where you have not even considered whether there are other factors and reasons that are contributing to a poor performance. Try to understand and take time to exercise grace. And so that's something that we do actively. Of course, if it's other forms of serious offenses, theft, and all those are definitely like what Reuben mentioned. So it will be dealt with differently. But otherwise, for performance related matters, we have to ask ourselves also: is it us actually as the employer who never trained, haven't given the mindset for growth in the company, haven't helped to motivate them to see the longer term picture or the vision, the bigger vision of why they should grow. I think the government these days, they emphasize a lot of lifelong learning, right? But it may or may not be caught on by everyone yet. And it's also upon us to share why it's important to stay up to date with trends and learning. And that's something that we have to encourage even on a culture for the company itself. Yeah.
I think on David's point on exercising grace, maybe if we stay on to this point and back to Reuben, there's a question from Sister Evelyn said to share if over the years you have had staff who came to faith while in your employment and what makes them turn to the Lord.
I'll answer the later part of the question first. What makes them turn to faith is definitely the Holy Spirit. And really, it's that journey that we walk with them. I think the time that they spend here, I have had opportunities to share with my colleagues. I think it really begins with making an effort to spend time with them, because it doesn't really, at least for me, in my experience, not happen just all of a sudden. I've had opportunities to share because the months and the years that were before this, I had opportunities to learn about them, learn about their families, and learn about their worldview, learn about moments where they have shared about weakness, about conflict. And I think opportunities I've had, at times I had opportunity to also speak truth into those moments. And I think over time, the seed is planted, there's watering, and then Spirit really does the rest, right? And it really gives the increase and really calls them to account and to call them to repentance. So definitely, I've had one staff who came to faith after leaving the organization and came to share with me the joy of her baptism only after she left. And she shared that it was really the times and the conversations that we had. And so it really is a concerted effort. It's a continuous journey of speaking truth and investing time in building that relationship. And that also means that you have to be a consistent witness. It's very challenging because you are living your life as a Christian in front of them, and they know, oh, like a Christian can do this kind of thing, right? So you have to be very consistent. You have to be very honest. At times when you fail, there are times when I lose my temper at them. You know, I have to apologize if it's uncalled for, and really to live an authentic Christian life. I'm not perfect, right? And so I think that also contributes to that journey of coming to faith for them. And I really thank God for the opportunities.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I think this question from Brother Galvin, and perhaps this can be directed to both of you. If you can shed some light on the uniqueness of the redemptive enterprise approach as compared to the world, which is also increasingly conscious of ethical and sustainable business, circular economy, etc. What are some of our Christian distinctive Zehen traits or perspective applied to business? Anyone want to take a step first?
Okay, let me try then. I think firstly, in terms of this redemptive aspect, how we see justice, I think when it comes to what is considered in terms of the typical view of ethical and sustainable businesses, it may miss out on the point of justice in terms of what is biblical justice. And a lot of times I see biblical justice as restorative, and which means that you're bringing people from a position where disadvantage to a position that they are considered equals. And I think this is something that it may not be as emphasized in terms of other businesses. For us, we see this as critical and important that justice be established. And so in terms of our policies, in terms of our efforts in the business model, it's already built into it as well. Yeah, beyond that, I think it's also the worldview of how we see things. I think the gospel worldview is where we really aim to be able to bring others into becoming more and more like Christ, right? That's very different from just ethical. A lot of things might be ethical, but it can still be questionable in terms of whether we are becoming more and more like Christ. So I think it's holding to an even higher standard. It's drawing our stakeholders towards understanding of who Christ is. And I think for myself, I have to carry that out on a day-to-day basis. And also for the leaders who are Christian, they will have to carry that out, because we represent, we are ambassadors of the kingdom, and we do have to not be double standard. A lot of times I realize that people are watching us, staff are watching us, the customers are watching us, and we have to be able to uphold those standards.
Thank you. Actually, for this question, Brother Georgie, do you want to chime in as well?
Okay, I just thought I chip in a few words on this thing. Earlier, I shared this whole table. We see the utilitarian model, then we have the ethical model, and then we have what we call the redemptive model. And so we need to raise the bar. In other words, what is the gold standard, so to speak, in God's kingdom? And that is really the redemptive model. And therefore, for those in business, whether as an employee, as a business owner, we always need to seek, at the end of the day, the whole focus of the redemptive models is not about ourselves, but others. So, do we die to ourselves? In things that we do we make sacrifice for others? It's a very challenging model, because it's really following Jesus all the way, which means it's all just focused on others. And it's a big challenge, because when you do that, you exist in a whole ecosystem in business, just like Reuben showed there. We have stakeholders, and these stakeholders can be, we seldom talk in our whole understanding. How do we relate to suppliers? How do we relate to competitors? These are big challenges. And for example, suppliers. Some years ago, I met a fund manager who ran a fund that is very strong on the whole redemptive purpose. And so he says he won't invest in this particular company because they have a policy to push for a certain percentage of reduction because they are so big and the supplier has to every year reduce its price by X%. So he says this is not doing justice to this supplier, right? He feels that the supplier should be well treated, be able to generate a certain return for his business. So therefore, how do you look at it? How do you look at competitor? And so sometimes we forget, even as a customer ourselves, we take advantage of every provider of a service or goods. Do we take it as a chance to exploit just because the old worldly saying customer is king? But in the kingdom of God, we don't operate on the basis of exploitative culture. So therefore, how do we treat a supplier of goods? When you go to a shop to buy things, how do you relate to the salesperson? Because at the end of the day, we think that we are king. So therefore, they have to be treated like a slave. And therefore, you press all the way to get the best bargain for yourself. So that is the way the world will operate. And so when we talk about a redemptive enterprise, the whole DNA is to bring the whole understanding of whatever we do is about others and how do we bring that redemptive impact to others so that they can experience redemption themselves. And that redemption comes when through that whole process, they have an encounter with Jesus and they are set free from their own bondages, from their own sins and fears especially. So it's a challenging model to do, but all of us are on a journey. We never arrive there at all in this whole model, but we need to journey towards that whole goal of at the end of the day that Jesus' name is glorified and they see that this is what Jesus would do and live in his time, in the way we run our business, in the way we treat other people, in the way we compensate people, because there are areas of justice that we need to address. And so therefore, how do you love your neighbor as you love yourself? And these are very important yardstick that you are able to look after the interests of those whom you serve and whom you relate to. So this model is a very powerful model, but it's also a challenging model. And especially when you have competitors, how do you love your competitor, right? And Reuben shared about how he gets involved in the industry where all those people are competitors as well as friends. And so we need to learn the process of engagement and seek the Holy Spirit and get the wisdom from the Lord to find solution. Praise the Lord.
Thank you, Brother Georgie. Reuben, do you have anything to add on this same question?
Yeah. Firstly, I have to say that I think we have to be very honest that not only Christians do not have the monopoly of a redemptive enterprise. And I say this knowing full well that God will, in his sovereignty, use anybody, any of his creation to glorify himself and to his own purpose. And so if we see non-Christian enterprise doing redemptive work, even though they don't know it, we must be definitely praising God for it. That being said, I think what is unique to us as Christians is Jesus, right? It's none other than that. And the holistic good news, the whole gospel that he brings. And I think, yes, the non-believers can do a good work, you know, a business that pursues justice and mercy and even flourishing to communities. And we praise God for that. But there are areas like Uncle Georgie mentioned that I think holistically have been left out. How we deal with competitors is something that has not been talked about much. And I think there's a question in the chat from Adeline about what to do if, for example, competitors attack us and our weaknesses and steal our market share. I think if you're a competitor, so just using as an example of how the Christian enterprise is very unique, is how we would turn the other cheek to these attacks. And I'll share my story. I mean, I have experienced this and far worse. I've had competitors go to the extent of corporate espionage. I've had dealt with corporate spies in my own company. And I'm a very small SME business, but that is how cutthroat the world is. And through intermediaries, we have to spread the gospel of peace and to share that we will not retaliate in the way that you have treated us. We are not stupid, we are not foolish, but we will not do and stoop to the same level as you, because this is not who we are. And we have to put that message out. We have to speak the truth. We have to turn the other cheek. We do so in love, but we trust God along that journey. So that has been my experience and how we deal with competitors, and really how that really is different and unique for Christian enterprises. And I think if your competitors attack you and your weaknesses, then I think the best thing you can do is to learn from it, right? It tells you where you can improve on and where you can survive as a business, because I think Christian enterprises must also be sustainable and definitely must also seek the flourishing of community. So you can do better, learn from them.
Well, thank you for that sharing, because I think that also answered one of the questions found in the chat group from Adeline. It says about what should Christians do if we learn that our competitors attack us on our weaknesses in our business and steal market share. So it's interesting that you actually talked about that, right? We're almost coming to the end of our Q&A. I think maybe I see two questions that maybe I'll kind of just consolidate into one question, and maybe that will be the last question for today. Is a question from Reuben Ang. So do you have daily habits, or both David and Reuben, that to keep God in the center versus getting bogged down with busyness? And then maybe the next question from Tay Kunming. Say, please comment on rest and work.
I'll just take the first one. Sorry, I'll just go first then.
Sure.
Sorry, the first question is about making daily habits. I think, as textbook answer as it is, really spending time with God at the beginning of the day. I think that really centers you and really reminds you of why you're doing what you're doing. And as David mentioned, that God is our CEO. I think there have been moments where where I've been too busy. And this past 3 months for me has been something like that, right? I haven't had an off day in the last 3 months because it's a national crisis and we're really fighting a war here to supply the food for hospitals and the quarantine centers. But I really realized in such moments that how important it is to really spend time with God every day, to protect that time. So I think it really is down to protecting that time that you spend with God. And I think the other question, sorry, what's the other question?
Sorry, it's about commenting on rest and work.
Rest and work. I'm not very good at that, so definitely have to set aside. I've learned that in the past 3 months, that as I have departed from a rhythm of rest, and it is a rhythm, right, that God instituted, that things will go haywire. And as we take stock of that, at least I take stock of that in the past 1 month. And I realized the impact that it had on my health and my mental health and my spiritual health is the need for that rhythm that you have to set for both yourself and also your staff as well. And that's something that I think is very important. And I myself have seen the detriments of ignoring that. So definitely ensuring that there's a rhythm of rest. Yeah.
David?
Yeah, thanks, Reuben. So my views are actually quite similar. In terms of the daily habits rise, I think the relationship with Lord and constantly drawing from the Holy Spirit, that's something that's very important. I think beyond the morning devotion as well, it's also prior to any meetings that I go for, especially if it's to deal with improving relationships with supplier, partner, or even within the staff. I think anytime that we need wisdom, pray to the Lord, because He will provide the wisdom, and it becomes a lot easier. And I just find that once you pray, it just sometimes the meetings just go a lot easier, and you get the various outcomes that are much more smoother. And also you're rested because you place it upon the Lord for His direction and His leading throughout the meeting as well. So in terms of rest, I think it's also something that we very actively steward in the company. We make it a point that there is very clear guidelines for the actual work hours. Beyond that, it's really based on whether the staff has something very urgent to rush. Otherwise, typically most will end of the day at the fixed time. And once we're home, we agree on certain policies as well. Like certain channels we communicate on Microsoft Teams, for example, and if you leave a message on Teams, you're not expected to answer it if it's after office hours until the next day. And other channels like Telegram and WhatsApp, sometimes if we don't control it, work can keep coming. So what we do is to say that after office hours, you can post other random things. If you want to share about pictures of your cat, that's fine, but don't talk about work. Don't bring in heavy questions like, what do you think of my report? Those you can email, those you can do it on Teams. And yeah, so I think small policies like that help. Beyond that is regular. We have a weekly sports day. We used to do that before COVID happened. We have the other monthly gatherings, and all this helps to build a culture that we really value, building up team. We build up the work-life balance, and also value what it means to work from a position of rest. Yeah.
No, thank you for that, for very insightful sharing from both David and Reuben. I'm afraid we are out of time for the Q&A. I noticed there were one or two other questions have not been answered. They seem a bit more technical in nature, so I think David has offered his email. Just highlight here, David Pong at waterroom.com, that you can email. And yeah.